Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness. I am Tony, your host, and this is the place where we talk all things strange and unexpected. As we approach Halloween this year, it's the time where all kinds of strange things and mysterious things happen. People all over the country love this holiday. I love it. My guest today loves it. And there's just more and more money being spent during this holiday for decorations and other things. So we know people really love this. So because of that, High Strangeness is going to dedicate a number of episodes this year on Halloween items. And so today I'm really excited because we're going to look at it and talk about an amazing home haunt, and it's one of the best I've ever seen in person. And so I'm excited to have my guest today, who is the architect of this amazing display, and his name is David. Is it Llewellyn?
Llewellyn.
Llewellyn. Perfect.
Llewellyn.
Llewellyn. Yeah. And he's from South Jordan, Utah. So with that, I want to welcome you, Dave, and to say I'm excited that you're on the show today, and I'm happy to share this with the audience and to talk about Raven Manor today. How are you doing, Dave?
Great. Thank you, Tony. I'm doing well. Excited to be here and love the Halloween holiday, like you said, and just the opportunity it brings to have some fun and
Absolutely.
make people happy. And that's the whole point of it. But yeah, doing good. Thank you.
Cool. Now, for those watching, we are actually taping in the summertime before we even get into the fall. So this next question will seem weird in the fall, but it's not right now. I was going to ask you, how has your summer been, or do you guys and your family have any fun things set up to do this year so that you're nice and summered out and ready to get into the fall?
Yeah, it's starting to get warm for sure for summer. Right now, my oldest son is doing training for the Army National Guard Reserves, and he is in San Antonio. Hence, I have this Alamo shirt on, but I got to show it's also a nod to the 80s Big Adventure, Tim Burton and Paul Rubens, of course. And we went to Missouri. He finished his basic training at the end of April, and we went to Missouri and for his graduation. And so we did that. Got a trip to the Oregon coast coming up at the end of the month. So looking forward to that. It should be a good summer. And then after that, we'll start to get into the closer months to Halloween and fall and start thinking about prepping and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun. I think the same thing. I love that time of year, but I do want to have a nice, strong, eventful summer so that it gets me ready for the fall. So make sure you guys have a nice, safe trip, and that's exciting. I'm glad you're going to get a chance to break away for a little bit.
Thank you.
Let's start this way today in our interview. I always like to ask my guests to share a little bit about themselves. A lot of times people, when they watch and hear this podcast, they want to know a little bit about the person who does or experienced something and just a little bit about them. It helps to relate a little bit. It helps to see if there's any commonalities between somebody in the audience and yourself. So maybe share something about your life. I'm curious, like the type of work that you do for a living. Is it to complement your display and the work that you do there, or is it completely different? Tell us a little bit about you, Dave.
Okay, right, yeah. Well, I'm a native to Utah. Grew up, born and raised here, and live in South Jordan, where we have the display now. As a kid, I love Disneyland, and this is probably the inspiration for doing what I do. As a kid, though, I wanted to be an Imagineer, right? I thought I'll be an engineer and then go work for Disney and help build rides. Kind of like the Haunted Mansion was a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was that didn't happen, obviously. So I claim it as a hobby now. And what I do for work is sysadmin, computers, servers, storage, SANs, and firewalls, and a lot of network troubleshooting and systems troubleshooting. While it's not directly related, I I think troubleshooting, uh, able to problem solving skills, making things work right, is a huge benefit to doing a Halloween display, or at least one that's
Yeah.
going to run
Yeah.
reliably and well. So I think there's some overlap there. If not, it's not directly though. I'm definitely not doing painting and carving and those kind of things for my job, but it's a hobby of mine. I love it. But grew up in Utah. I'm an only child. What else? Always loved math and science. Physics was my favorite class in high school. Um, Went to the University of Utah and started with a physics major because I had a scholarship, and then switched to mechanical engineering. Was my focus after the first year. But um, anyway, yeah, that's a little about me. I'm married, have 3 kids. 24 is my oldest, 22 my daughter, and then my youngest is 17. My youngest son,
Wow.
boy, girl, boy. So I've been married for about 30 years. 30. I have to think about this. Sorry,
Yeah.
31 years this year. So
If your wife's
yeah.
listening, he knew. He knew.
Yeah, I'll have to think about how old I am sometimes, depending on the month and what. I'm just getting older where I have to think about these things, but
I'll tell you. And it's
keep
not
them
something you
straight.
get excited to think about, right?
Yes, my own age, yes. My anniversary, no, I get excited about that. That's
Yeah.
definitely the right answer. Right?
Yeah.
No, I'm happy and to do Halloween and I like what the work I do too, and I think it's a good balance between the two. I think if I did Halloween or haunted house or something for a living, I don't know. There's people that can do that and
Yeah.
do it every day of the year, but I think it might take some of the joy out of it. Right? It is kind of nice to put it away, like you say, winter, summer, and then come back to it fresh and ready and pick it up. So yeah,
Yeah. It can definitely serve as an outlet, I bet. I
for
think
sure.
that when people do something that they have a real passion for, and it's not like year round, that it does allow them to break away for a little bit and come back and really be recharged and ready to go. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, new ideas. Started my display right, like everybody else. You start with small and you grow and add to it, and mine's been the same theme ever since 2001. Before that, I would kind of do something different each year, but it's been growing, and as it's grown, it's gotten to the point where I'm kind of feeling like I'm not trying so much to add to it every year. I'd like to, but I just the setup for everything and the storage.
Yeah.
But even with that mindset, there's a lot of years where I don't plan to do anything. I'm not planning anything this year to add,
Yeah.
but September comes around or whatever, and that kind of fall air, and I don't know, something about get the creative juices flowing, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden we'll get an urge to do a bunch of stuff. So last minute, but it's fun.
It's exciting. And I do have a couple questions as we go further into the interview about storage and stuff like that, because I know that that can be a real challenge for these types of setups. Now, before we go into any of that, though, I think I know the answer, but I was wondering, what does Halloween mean to you? You know, you do an amazing display, and some people get excited about doing something like that for the challenge and the project. Other people just love the event or holiday. How do you look at your display in this time of year?
Sure, yeah, good question. I I think for me, I always loved Halloween as a kid. I mean, I went trick or treating, but I was probably about 10 years old when I started getting into doing decorations at home that were just really uh, beginner and amateurish, of course, but um, still going out with my friends and just decorating the front porch, and then it kind of, after a couple more years, I got to a point where we started doing a little miniature spook alley in the front yard, a friend and I, and stayed home. But I always loved Halloween. It's a lot of fun as a kid. Your imagination can kind of go when you get into um, creating things, and go to haunted houses as a kid. The March Dimes here was a big one back when I was younger, and they'd put on a haunted house and go through that with my family, and it was a lot more jump scares and things and people jumping out, right, than what I do now, but it was a lot of fun. I think Halloween, like I've told many people again, it's not for me so much about being scary. It's just kind of more that um, the magic of putting on a show, illusions, and just kids wondering how does that candle float or that ghost fly, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Um, as I was asking those questions when I went through the Haunted Mansion as a kid, right, at Disneyland, I just thought that was so cool, and it was just done so perfectly with the whole ambiance of sound, what you saw, and and so Halloween's a great excuse to put on kind of a mini Disneyland attraction in my front yard.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people ask me about Christmas, right? But I don't really do anything for Christmas. In fact, pretty minimal lights. I think I'm too tired after putting everything away, mid-November, getting it all buttoned up. But also, it's just snow and ice and that. I'm not a Scrooge. It's not that I don't like Christmas, but I guess I'm just devoting all my energy to Halloween.
Sure. Sure. That
But yeah,
makes sense.
certainly love Christmas and Halloween. Not that I don't love Christmas, and certainly the meaning behind Christmas is awesome. But Halloween just kind of became my thing, and so
Yeah.
I ran with it.
Well, it's funny because I've listened to some of what you said, and I love Disney. We've taken our kids and family there many times, and it's funny because I don't really get excited about the rides. I get excited about the rides that are thematic. You mentioned
Yeah,
the Pirates of the Caribbean. Love it. I love that ride so much. And it's funny because in past years when we'd go to different places where it was a haunted house, people would jump out at you, and my kids would laugh at me because I would be unfazed. I'd be staring and touching the props or the way things are built because I was just caught up in the beauty of the work. And people were jumping out, rah, and it never even phased me. And the kids would just laugh about that.
yeah, I think we have that in common. I agree, and I love Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's those two rides right
Amazing.
next to each other are probably my two favorites. So, but you're right, the theming. That's one thing Disney does really well, and that's something I've tried to incorporate with my display. Right, there's a lot of Halloween displays that are everybody can do their own thing and have their own spin on it, and they should. Um, but again, mine's not trying to be scary; it's more just kind of um, spooky,
Yeah.
and the ambiance of it and the theming of it. Um, it's just kind of very Disney inspired. So that's. In fact, I was going to show this too. As a kid, I mean, I got this record from a friend
Nice.
of mine. I was probably like 10 or 11 years old, right? And he had this record, and he had some decorations on his front porch. Disney's 1979 chilling sounds of the haunted house. Um, and I'd listen to that record and just headphones back as a kid, and just kind of that just the listening of the soundtrack of this record, but not seeing it. Right, today we have YouTube and video and everything to go with it, but just let your own imagination build
Yeah.
the story that you're hearing, and I don't know, that just inspired me a lot when I was a kid to get kind of and sorry, kind of into Halloween, into decorating, and into maybe creating more than just a decoration, that but more of a theme and a
Yeah.
story behind it.
It's funny. I don't have the record today, but I had that too. I remember that. As soon as you showed it to me, I was like, oh, I remember that. That's so cool. Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah,
So I think you've answered this question because I was going to ask you what has inspired your display. And it's definitely a strong feeling from Disney, which kind of pushed you in that direction. Correct?
yeah. I think it's just an excuse to have a little mini Disney attraction in my front yard, as I said. Um, I initially, right when I started out, it was just fun and to create. You know, I mean, I had rubber snakes and spider webs on the front porch, and in school we made those little cotton ball Kleenex ghosts, and hang them around and off
Yeah.
the porch and off the awning. I think my first animated effect when I was probably 11 or 12 was to take my little, you know, briefcase record player as kids, we had little record players, right? And 45s or 33s. And I took one of those Kleenex cotton ball ghosts and put it on a straw or a chopstick or something and taped it to the side of the turntable. And it just went round and round in the window. And I just thought, oh, cool. It's my first animated thing, right? But,
Yeah.
and just put that in the window with, with everything else. And yeah, that's really humble beginnings, but it was fun to start building and making things.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly where I was going to go next was how did you get started? You're talking about as a young boy, maybe 10 or 12, saying, oh, let me see what I can do. But as you kept going and as you had your own home and your family, you said you had a few different displays until you settled into the one that you have. What sorts of things did you do early on?
Yeah, well, I'd say that was probably the very start of it in my first home, and my dad was great. I wanted a way to trigger some electronic props when I was very very young, like just a light to come on as people walk through a roped off front yard, right? And he helped me. He was a repair technician, um, Lockheed Martin and Sperry and Univac. They've had several names, but anyway, he helped me wire up some light switches to some outlets in a box, right? So I had like 6 different switches with 6 different outlets. I could flip them on and off as people walked through the yard, and that's how I got started. And we had just dummies and lights and strobe lights and things. And then we moved when I was in 8th grade, and out in the Cottonwood area. We had a little bit bigger yard with you walk around the whole yard. We ripped off the whole thing and go in one gate on one side and through the back and out the gate on the other side. And there were side yards. And I had a couple of friends of mine and my cousins would help be in it. And we had a whole walkthrough display where we had ghosts on pulleys running towards people. Audio, we set up different scenes like Frankenstein's laboratory or pirates and their treasure and stuff like that. It was a bunch of random stuff, but it was pretty big and took a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I was just in junior high, high school at that time, and I think one of the most effective scares we had at that was just I hung a tarp right over a line, and it was as people were walking down the roped off pathway, it was just on this side of them, on this side, and just a white tarp. They didn't think anything of it, but I had a sprinkler on the other side, one of those impact rotors. I had to set that off, and it hit the tarp, and it would kind of move the tarp towards them and just make the sound. They wouldn't get wet, right? But that's that sound, and that was one of the best scares I remember getting.
Yeah, I can see people jumping.
And then I graduated, moved out of my parents' home, and that was kind of the end of the walkthrough in this kind of spook alley. And then I was married for probably 7 years, and I think my mom just kept bringing up, remember when you used to do Halloween in the spook alley? And so my wife finally said, hey, you could do something again, if you wanted. Yeah. So it just kind of then became a front yard display only, and it just started off with a couple different themes until I figured out the theme that we're on today, which is, I can talk more about, but it just kind of has then grown from and kind of filled in the yard. And then we moved again 10 years ago in 2014, and that the current house we're in today, which we just continue to kind of fill it out, but it's gotten to be pretty sizable again, just to set up and store.
Yeah.
You want talk about storage, but sorry, I forgot the question now that I've.
Oh, that's okay. This is great. I just want to get you started and then you go. So as we go through the interview, I've got a number of questions, but as I pull up some of these pictures, I can't help it. We've got to talk about some of these pictures as we go. I love this display, and I know it moves. Can you talk about it for just a minute for those audience?
The current display, sure. So the picture I'm seeing that you have here is our front yard, our cemetery. In the back, I can see the mausoleum. That's inside the mausoleum is a flying crank ghost that was made famous or invented by Doug Ferguson. Yeah. He has a YouTube channel as well, but he's that, I think it was 2000. I made tombstones for the front yard when we were starting over as I just talked about, and they were just out of cardboard, right? Painted with writing on them. And it rained really bad that year. at my house, and just kind of ruined everything. And the tombstones, obviously, cardboard doesn't like water, so I remember searching on the internet, going, well, how can I make tombstones that are more weather resistant? And I found the extruded foam uh, tombstones that we use today. And that's what we have on display that you're seeing. They're all handmade. Everything I have pretty much is homemade, more for the most part. There's a couple of exceptions. Uh, but we have the tombstones, and we built that mausoleum just to hold the flying crank ghost, which ours is named Eleanor. And then later her last name was Rigby. So she's Eleanor Rigby, but not to the Beatles. But it was basically 6 tombstones in that mausoleum with that ghost in it. And that mausoleum was kind of a big undertaking to build, but I knew I wanted that flying crank ghost. That was just is an amazing effect, and really life size, eye catching, and it stayed and remained. This will be 24 years later now that we've had her.
I was going to say, it's one of the first things I remember seeing when I came by and saw your house years ago, first time, and I was caught by that. I said, whoa, look at that. And then my kids at the time were just going, wow, Dad. It was great. It really was.
Yeah, and I just want to give nods to Doug Ferguson for creating that and sharing that on the internet. And it's a reliable, wonderful prop, and most of the stuff I've made, I mean, it's not like I came up with it. It's not original. It's just my own build of it and my take on it. But they all look a little different. But so I've got all my tombstones are again handmade, and they're kind of unique because they're just customized. Most of them are just some random names that I wanted them to look real. And then later, as time went on, I've done many that are nods to people, either friends or neighbors, or there's one for Walt Disney as well, just a kind of little tribute. And the newest one I did last year was a monument for P.B. Herman, or Paul Rubens, when he passed away, but I wanted to make a kind of an animated talking tombstone monument. That's what that ended up being.
Nice.
And in the very foreground of this photo is the grave slab, which I just mentioned that one and give credit where I saw that originally, at least that shape and the lid moving was from the Hollowed Haunting Grounds. They were a display in California. I never saw it personally, but just on the internet. And they ran for a long time, like 30 years or maybe more, in the 70s, I believe, through the 90s, maybe even beyond. I forget when it finished, but wonderful props. So there's just that grave slab there has a little hand sticking out of it, like there's a skeleton or something inside trying to get out, and the lid moves, and it's been a lot of fun. We've got a bunch of other. There's lots of other things we can talk about. There are a couple things that are more unique, or maybe more originals as far as I know I came up with, but I want to say, definitely I was inspired by others and on what they put on the internet. And it was very inspiring to me to have the internet and websites and, Mark's monster list of Halloween props and YouTube and why I think it's great you're doing a podcast to help put it out there and let people find it. So thank you.
Well, and absolutely. And we're going to go through a few more different props that you have as we go through the interview today. But I do want to just say this. It's kind of a shout out to you for the amazing work that you do. It is crisp and clean and very well done. Look, people can go online and find things, but it's one thing to see it. It's one thing to see how it's made, and it's another thing to actually make it happen. I've tried doing things before that I've seen on the internet. They don't come out like yours. So you do a great job. And, as we go through some of these pictures, people take a look. And then also at the end of the episode, there will be Dave's website and stuff like that. And I encourage you to take a look at the amazing work he's done. But this one's wonderful. I love, and it moves too, doesn't it? This one with the hand right there.
Yeah, that grave slab in the foreground. Yep, it's motion triggered. I've got a controller I bought years ago. I think it was back when I think it was in the late 90s. Basically, it's motion triggered. You can have a delay, so it doesn't go right off immediately, and then it runs for maybe 25 seconds or so. The lid moves back and forth with a kind of a grinding sound. It's supposed to be like the stone moving, and you can hear. And I think I took the audio for the guy inside struggling and saying, "Let me out of here," from the Haunted Mansion, which is hope that's okay. But it's personal use. We don't charge anything, but he's just saying, let me out of here, let me out of here. And then it stops and it can't be re-triggered for, another minute or two, just so it's not constantly going off. But yeah, it was kind of fun to build that. That was added in 2011, I think, is when that got added to our display with the movement.
Well, I remember last year, I've got several grandchildren, and one of them was old enough to recognize that it was moving last year, and they were like, "Pop, there's something in there." He was so freaked out by it. It was perfect. It really was. So it's a great effect, and it's done very well. I'm going to go to another picture here as well, but I want to ask you. My next question is going to be about storage. I'll tell you, when my kids were younger, I used to do a lot of yard hunt stuff as well, and I do a different display every year. I tried different things from crashed UFOs and everything, but I had to do everything that was disposable. So I used a lot of cardboard and PVC, but I didn't have storage space, so I had to almost redo a new concept every year and get out everything and rebuild. And it was a lot of work. And I kept thinking, man, I wish I had more room in my garage or whatever. Talk about storage, if you can, for people, like how you do it, and if there are any ideas that you can share with people who may have, some displays and they're like, geez, I want to add to it, but where am I going to put it? Do you have any thoughts or advice for people?
Yeah, you're right on the money. That is one of the number one concerns for homeowners, storage. And that's probably the question I get the most from people that come to my display is, where do you store all this? Um, and, and now the answer is a little different now that we moved into our current house than it was at our last house. In my last house, well, first of all, let me say the mausoleum that we saw in the last photo, that's kind of big, but it was built to break down, right? It breaks down into flat wall sections. It's framed out of 2x3s, but I've seen people do them out of 1x2s, and just, you can actually take them apart and store them pretty efficiently. I should have a picture for you of my current garage, right, and showing everything, but it's kind of hard to get a sense of the scale of it when it's all kind of stacked in there. But I think people are surprised how well it does store. At least I break stuff down. Probably the hardest thing for me to store is those tombstones. They don't break down. They're kind of fragile. I mean, they're somewhat durable, right? But you don't want to rubbing on each other or scratching, and it can get damaged. So I've got a nice set of metal shelves in my garage that run all the way down a long wall, and they're really high, and on the ceiling's high. So I get a ladder and put them all up on top of this, on top of the metal shelving at the very top of the shelves, and they sit up there, and I kind of have to stack them like Tetris, where turn them over and inter stack them. So I've got like 30 of them up there, right? But the mausoleum all breaks down, like I said, and I just lean that up against the wall. So what I have today is a 3rd-car garage. It's really a 4-car garage because it goes all the way back, and that back cap is pretty much all where the Halloween goes. I stack the fencing, all the fence and the columns and the mausoleum on one side and the tombstones on the other on the shelves. A few things go in my basement, smaller items like projectors and speakers and things like that I don't want in the garage or getting bumped. But in my last house, I didn't have a 3rd-car garage. So I built some shelves above the garage, the 2-car garage on top, right? I got in the attic and put some 2x4s up there across the joists and used some metal threaded rod that was into those 2x4s coming down through the sheetrock in my garage. And then I hung a big shelf in the ceiling of my garage from that. And on my website, I do have some older pictures of that. They're not the best quality, but they show that. I was able to get a lot of that. They're kind of open shells. They're just open framed, so there wasn't decking on it. Yeah. It was just the 2x3s, and they used 2x3s just to get that extra little, inch of space clearance I needed. But they're open, so you can kind of maneuver your hands and move things from below. But obviously, since they're open, I'm storing very big things up there, right? It worked great for Halloween and Christmas stuff. So that was kind of a clever idea to tuck a lot of stuff away. And then in my old house, I had to put all the tombstones, I had to carry them all downstairs and put them under the stairs. So they were safe. And that was kind of a drag because you had, 20 of them, you're making so many trips up and down the stairs. But luckily I don't have to do that. We moved with that in mind that, it'd be nice to have some storage in the garage and on the same level, so things don't have to go up and down the stairs as much. So, really I just use a hand cart or hand truck to move the fence columns, the gate columns in and out of the garage. And I can pretty much set it all up. I'm kind of a one-man operation, honestly, as I set up, which people say, well, why do you do that? I'd help you. Or, my kids help me at times and do help with some of the bigger stuff. But for the most part, my mind it gets distracted and I can't do two things at once, can't chew gum. So if I have somebody there, I'm talking and I'm not working or I'm getting distracted. It's just best for me to work alone and focused. And I think that's probably how maybe I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and I can get everything just so how I want it and the details looking so good because I've just got it very careful and methodical about it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah,
I get that. And sometimes it is better because you're able to, somebody else might put it down with a certain level of care, but not really, be aware of some of the specifics, right? Spacing and different things like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Or in good intentions on moving a tombstone that they're made out of foam, right? That maybe not realizing they can break if there's bumped into something else. So anyway, it's been a labor of love for me, and I spend a lot of time setting it up because I do most of it myself. And last year I actually counted up some of the hours that I was spending doing it each day because I kind of have a typical routine and set up when I start, but I never really counted the kind of little part days or half days. And last year I tried to total all that up and get an idea of how many hours, because I get asked that question all the time, and you probably want to know that. But I think it came to be around 60 hours or so for the setup of all the days that I totaled up. And then if you include the run time for the show, because I run from 7 to 10, but I'm out there 6 to 10 or 11 every night, right? Because I stay out there and I love to talk to people.
Yeah.
And keep an eye on things. And if there's a little something that needs fixing or tweaking, I'll go take care of it. So if I count all those hours, I think I'm over like 75 hours for the season, including the setup and the takedown and put away. So anyway, it's a lot of effort. I don't think that's for everybody, and there might be people that do more than that for sure. I know there are displays that are much more elaborate than mine, and they either have a big crew or they spend a lot more time than I do since I do everything myself.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, if they're bigger, they're not as nice. Yours is amazing. But I will say this. I do know that I don't know if you're still doing it this way. We already know that it's about 3 days before Halloween that your display is up. Do you still do it about 3 or 4 days before? Or are you putting some stuff out days or weeks before that?
Yeah, great question. I run the display 3 nights. It's my typical run schedule. So the 29th through the 31st, it's only 3 nights that I do it. And there's a lot of people that have displays that put stuff out for 2 weeks or the month. And I know a lot of people tell me, you should do it longer. That's a lot of work for just 3 nights. And when I think we went to 3 nights back in 2003. I mean, we only started the current theme and really growing it after 2001. So the first couple of years, it was just 1 night. Yeah. And then it got to be so much work. It was like, 1 night isn't enough. And we had people that want to come see it, but they're busy on Halloween with their own parties or kids and trick-or-treating. So we did 3 nights. We did 4 nights, I think, in 2003, and then decided to go back down to 3 because it's a lot of work for me to, as I said, I'm out there and kind of babysitting it and keeping an eye on things. And I love it, but I think 3 nights is about the right length of compromise for being worn out versus getting a chance for people to see it. And I think it's nice to, we run some music and things, and I guess I don't want to overstay the welcome with the neighbors, right? They love it, but I know if I ran it a whole month, I think I'd get sick after that long. But 3 nights is good now as far as the setup. So yeah, I set up. The big stuff all comes out on the 27th. I mean, nothing. My yard's pretty much blank slate, and well, I should say on about the 20 or 21st of the month, while the weather's still nice, I'll put the poles. I have poles I use for my axe-worthy ghosts that fly overhead.
Mm-hmm.
I'll usually get out and do those before anything's in the yard, right? Because you can't move a ladder around and all over the yard and string fishing line up 14 feet high with stuff in your yard. So I do that first, and usually around the 21st when the weather's still nice, and get those poles out there. And so that'll be there, and then that just sits there until the 27th of October, and that's when I start bringing out those fence pieces and that mausoleum. All that big stuff comes out the 27th. The 28th, I bring out all the wiring and the lights. And I'll say here on this photo you have, that's an older photo. I mean, it's in our current yard, but I can see the floodlights back there. That's changed. So I used to just use floodlights, maybe I had 8 or 10 of them throughout the yard, but they throw a lot of light, and decided a few years ago to go to a little mini LED spotlight for every tombstone. And
I love that.
So I built, and that was able to, the reason I did that too is because I wanted to do a lightning and thunder effect, right? And the house was already kind of washed out with light from all these floodlights illuminating the tombstones, but they were throwing a lot of light on the house and the yard. And you didn't get a lot of contrast when the lightning would go off from, the flash of those strobes versus anyway. So the little mini floodlights, and I built those from, I need to give a shout out to Derek Young from Van Oaks Props. He has a great YouTube channel and a lot of props, and he usually does a video every week. Either Halloween or he'll do other things too. He does a lot of Star Wars props and builds. But he had the plan that I followed for the mini LED spotlights, made a couple tweaks, but they're homemade, right? You can spend a lot of money buying 50 of those, or I think I have 40 or 50 of them now.
Wow.
But made them off the shelf parts, and it's got a great tutorial on those. So that wiring on the 28th of October, it got to be so more intense, because instead of throwing out maybe a dozen floodlights with extension cords, it became low voltage wiring to 50 independent little spotlights, right? That all terminate back to a one power supply. And it's anyway, now my wiring went from 1 day to 2 days. So the 28th and the 29th, I'm doing basically the wiring and the lights. And the 29th, which is the first day I'm going to run that night for the 3 nights. The 29th is when all the props, like the caretaker, you see there, comes out. He's been reworked since that photo. He has a lantern now he holds and moves, but the caretaker and the weeping widow and the ghosts and the tombstones all come out on the 29th. So so it's pretty much those 4 days, including the poles.
Yeah.
And then there are a couple of rooms in the house, I'll say quickly too, like the office window and an upstairs window where I use some Atmos FX projections, as well as a Pepper's Ghost effect, which is something I've always wanted to do since the Haunted Mansion, and never.
Yeah.
It took a long time to make it come to fruition, but I have a pretty good sized piece of plexiglass that I use for that, and it used to be a static ghost around the corner that the light would reflect off of and come out the window, and he'd turn on and off and just appear and disappear. And then just a couple of years ago, I pulled him out of storage, and his UV paint on him kind of made him glow with the black light was kind of flaking off, and I don't know, he wasn't looking so hot. So I ended up instead, the last couple of years, I use a TV on that sidewall and show Atmos FX videos that instead of just showing directly out the window, they're around the corner and they reflect off a piece of plexiglass. So they're kind of ghostly. You can see through them. And I've got a floating candelabra that goes in that room too, so that you kind of see the candelabra through the.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a little bit, because I love that effect. And I want to say to the audience, I do have a couple of pictures with exactly what you just talked about. So you'll get a chance to see on this episode that effect, not in motion, but you'll be able to see a still picture of that. It really is great. I love it. I do want to say, Dave, what you did by adding those small lights, I mean, I loved everything before, but it really did something subtle and nice that really makes it pop even more. It really, I don't know how to explain it. I just really love the way it just kind of lights up the individual items, like your tombstones. And then, like you're saying, when the lightning happens and everything like that, it just all works much better. I love it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. It just kind of slowly evolves, right? And I continue to improve it as I see little things that I think, oh, I can. Even those little mini spotlights. I first built them. I used a bulb from Amazon that it was more of a yellow color to it, but it was kind of a warm white is how it was sold, but it really was too yellow, and I was just noticing it's throwing off my photos and my camera. It's, your camera tries to auto white balance,
Yeah.
and other things will come out blue, and so I think it was just last year I replaced all those bulbs with a new bulb or a little more costly bulb from a different supplier and website. That there was a lot of. Was that worth it? I don't know. I think it was. But
Yeah.
it was it's more expense and time reworking just every one of those little spotlights that. But now I think the lighting's much better. But yeah, as I see things, I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to make it better in little ways or more reliable. The things
Yeah.
I find I'm constantly having to fix through the show. I've tried to resolve those over the years so that the things can run more trouble free. But it's kind of, and then again, that's the problem solving nature, I guess. I
Yeah.
like solving problems or figuring out how to solve a problem, um, making things work simpler. There's a lot that I can talk about, but that's it's definitely played a big part of what I do.
Yeah.
Thank you for your feedback on those lights. Yeah, I love those too,
They're great.
and how that.
They really are. I did want to say to the audience too, one of the things that people might not be thinking about, I don't know if it was an issue for you, Dave, at some point, but I do know, unfortunately, people mess with your setup. So I have somebody that lives, it's a friend that lives a block away from me, and he doesn't do anything as cool as yours, but he does put some different things out with some animatronic type things. And those new skeleton type dogs and things that are now big. Um, and people took off with him, and he was so upset. Like he put all this effort, he's doing this for the community, and somebody pulled up in the middle of the night about 2 o'clock. I caught him on my camera, and they just pulled a couple of them and took off. It's terrible. Did you experience anything weird like that? People tampering with your display?
Luckily, no, I haven't. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, initially, when I added the fence that goes around our display, that was in 2002. We had our mausoleum and our 6 tombstones in 2001. And 2002, we added another 5 or 6 tombstones. And I remembered in 2001, I had people looking at the display, but then little kids going, "That's cool." They'd walk right through the yard, right up to the front door, and not go on the sidewalk. And I'm like, "Well, there's all these cords, there's
Right.
wires, tombstones. They may not realize are foam and try to sit on one, but no, luckily no damage was done." And so 2002 thought, well, we need to add a fence, and that just kind of worked into the theme. But now the fence is all PVC and wood. It's not going to stop somebody from breaking in, obviously, but I think it does help deter people from coming in the yard at night. When I'm done, I keep it all closed up, and then those the lightning that I added in, I think it was 2020. It's been just a few years now, but I use 4 big 100-watt LED floodlights for that. They're up on the top of my poles that I use for the Axworthy ghosts. So they're 14 feet up, and they're just pointed down in the yard. And when they go off, for that lightning flash, I
Mm.
really wanted the lightning to be more than just a little bulb, right? I wanted it to
Yeah.
really look bright and surprise things. But the benefit of that is that when I'm done for the night at 10 p.m. after we shut down, I go and swap those lights from the thunder mode to just a work light mode, right? Where I just light up the whole front yard and I can see and clean stuff up. And I'll put some of I always bring my fog machine and my speakers and and the projectors that I don't want to leave out overnight for temperature, weather, or just, you know,
Yeah.
being stolen. Bring those things in, but obviously the bigger stuff, all the homemade mausoleum and fence and a lot of the tombstones I've started leaving out, because that I leave that light on. It's like a motion light, so if anyone does come in the yard or even near the front yard, it kind of lights up the whole yard. And not that that's going to stop somebody if they're in and out, but I think it helps deter. But I've
Yeah.
been fortunate. I think the other reason I've been fortunate is because I only run 3 nights. Again, this stuff's out very limited time. Part of that is just, again, not to overrun its welcome, but I think it's just keeps it safe, and
Yeah.
it's limited, and and really the other reason I do that I didn't mention is just the weather. I'm always worried about the wind in the city I live in South Jordan. And if the right storm comes and enough wind hits us, it's gonna break some of those homemade props I have. I mean, they've tried to be built to hold up, but
Yeah.
but that's what I worry about more than anything. But luckily, I've been fortunate. Nobody's vandalized or stolen anything. I think the worst I've had is some fence getting broken because maybe kids don't realize it's fake and they kind of climb up on it, want to see what's inside. And
It's true. You can't really tell that it's not real. It's that it looks real. So it's amazing.
well, thanks. Yeah, the darkness of night helps cover up a lot of that, of course. But people tell me it looks great even in the day, but it's just plywood and paint and PVC, a
Yeah.
lot of it. But it sells at night. It sells the effect, of course, and then
Yeah.
when it's lit right.
Well, it's funny. When I used to do my version of something, people would say, "Hey, what advice do you have?" And I would say, because they'd say, "I don't have a lot, but I want to do something." I'd say, "Lighting is your friend. Know how little lighting you want, because you can make anything spooky if the lighting is dim and stuff like that." Um, and so that's it. That's something for people to think about too. If you want to do something on your lawn and you want to build up to it over the years, just have the right lighting. And that's why I think like the lighting that you have, it's already an amazing display. Like you said, during the day, it's perfect. At night, it's just flat out amazing. It is.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the lighting, you're right on. That's important, and I try to balance it and make everything look as uniform as I can. And it's great with those low voltage spotlights because they're all running off one power supply, and I've got one dimmer, so I can just dim them all
Yeah.
down to where I need on one shot, and it's great. But yeah, I tried to pay attention to the lighting and the look, and also the sound and what I'm doing. Um, it's been a lot of fun. I just love kind of the whole everything coming together and the balance of it all and the final effect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, on the screen right now, we have that one display you were talking about. That is beautiful. Just not even the movement and the ghost, but just everything. I mean, it's just the lighting, the candles, just everything. It looks like real stone. It really is very good. So I was going to ask you, what is there a specific prop or a section of your display that you find that you think is the most successful and you get the most positive feedback from people? Like I said, and like you said, I know you're out there and mingling with people all the time. So I'm not sure if people have shared that with you.
Yeah, I think the thing I get most comments on her initially was Eleanor here, the flying crank ghost we talked about,
Mhm.
because she's life size and when she's moving, she's basically a big marionette, on strings with a motor above, and so she floats up and down. Her hands go up and down. The glowing eyes. There's a little fog in there too. I run the fog machine out of the mausoleum and pipe it into the yard, but a little overspray on the tube will stay sometimes inside and give it a little foggy effect like that. I think she was probably the most eye catching thing initially, and I guess I've been running so long that I don't get as many comments about her, at least less, except for people maybe that are
Yeah.
new visitors. I think everybody's been coming, they've seen it, and they love it though because she's kind of always been in the center of the yard, and people always stop and look at her and take pictures of that ghost. That's probably number one, I would say. I think second to that is just the overhead Axeworthy ghosts. They're named Axeworthy from Scott Axeworthy. They're just a little ghost that fly overhead on a little pulley system like a ski lift with cars going around. They're just miniature ghosts, and I think just that motion, because there's four of them I have flying over the whole display, um, kind of gets attention, and that's one that it's definitely a common effect, and you see it done a lot. Or I mean, I've seen it on the internet done a lot, but I don't see it done a lot in my neighborhood or in Utah. I mean,
Yeah,
not
I
to say
haven't
people aren't,
actually seen very many people do it, to be honest with
the
you.
only reason I don't think you do is because it's probably the effect that requires the most patience, tediousness, and working out the problems. And it gave me a lot of problems, but and when it had problems, it's not easy to fix because it's again up over the yard and you've got things in the way. But when it's working right and they just kind of are slowly floating over the yard, and you can see some of that, or your viewers can on my website. I have some links for some YouTube videos for the different years. They're featured in some of the different years more prominently, but that's probably the second thing.
Yeah.
And then more recently, as I said, Atmos FX, they're animated products. They're just videos either on a TV or you can project them in your window with a projector. I've got a few of those around the yard I've added. That's kind of one of the things that isn't homemade, but I've loved bringing that animation and the movement in. People seem to love that. I've got a full size, like a 10-foot wide screen that's maybe 5.5, 6 feet tall on the side of the yard that I can kind of have in the background of the cemetery with skeletons dancing or, rising out of the graves. It's been a lot of fun. And then I've got one in the window and the TV, and then I've got the, they also have the jack-o'-lantern jamboree, and you can project that onto actual pumpkins, which I use real pumpkins and just project it on those three, and they sing songs and tell stories. You've seen that, but
I have.
That's a lot.
And I do have a picture of it too. People will be able to see it at the end. Yeah.
Just anything that moves, right? I'm finding people love the things that move. And initially I didn't have a lot of moving things other than Illinois right there on the screen. That was kind of the main moving effect. And then we added the Acts for the Ghosts, and I just had the projections and the grave slab we talked about earlier with the lid that moves. And the last few years I put a couple of skeletons. There's one that rocks a little bit back and forth in the cemetery, and there's one that pops up and down over a tombstone. So I've tried to incorporate more movement into this display. And we've got that Paul Rubens P.B. Herman tombstone that I just added last year, that the whole lid will open up and it talks to you. It's been fun to add things that move. That's what I've been trying to focus my energies on lately. If I add anything, I want it to be something that moves, but also something that will work with our theme, right? I don't want to have zombies and chainsaws and witches, and I try to keep it just a cemetery theme with the ghosts and skeletons, pretty much. Now, singing pumpkins probably don't work with that, but
I think it does.
Some exceptions. I mean, they work with it, but yeah, they're, I guess it's all classic spooky Halloween character kind of things.
Right. My next question was, here's a picture. We can talk about that in a minute, but I love the posts. Amazing. My question to you is materials, props, things that you use. Can you share with people maybe some suppliers and stuff that maybe you look to when you want to pick up different things? And I know you build most of it, but maybe it's Lowe's. I don't know. What do you do?
Yeah, I definitely shop a lot at Lowe's. I would say Home Depot more, just because it was closer to me and my work. But yeah, Home Depot and Lowe's. In fact, I was interviewed by a local news station. It's been way back now, 2004, and then they had a live spot on the news, right? And I mentioned on there that she said, "Where do you get all this?" And I said, "Well, it's homemade. I go to Home Depot and buy plywood. Those columns right there you see are just probably 1/4-inch sheet of plywood and 2x4, 2x3 framing underneath, and they're painted, and then the little signs on the front are the foam, the same foam that we carved the tombstones out of. And that foam is also something you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. It's the extruded foam. You see it sold in like 4x8 sheets, either pink or blue. You see it in construction sometimes, but it's great to carve into for tombstones. And I carve all the lettering out mostly with an X-Acto knife by hand, because it looks good and clean. And so definitely most of my supplies come from Home Depot or Lowe's for sure. The gate and fence is wood and ABS or PVC. Those little rings in the gates are just, it's got, I think it's 4-inch ABS black pipe, and just cut it in little rings, little strips out of it, and glued them in there. But it looks like a wrought iron fence, right?
It does. I'm not surprised kids climb on it, really, because it looks real.
Yeah, I always see people, even adults, are knocking on the walls of the ladder, shaking the fence. They're usually wondering if it's real, or so they can put it to the test. Sure, you can tell if you do that, but So yeah, it's mainly wood and PVC for the fence, and the tombstones as you see in the yard, or that foam board. That mausoleum is just plywood, um, and a lot of paint. But I've got some supplies. I always get my controllers and my motors now. For the motors, I used to use gear motors, and they are kind of replaced now by windshield wiper motors. They're kind of become the hunter's friend. I'm sure it's not news to people that are into this, but they're DC, but they run quiet and they're powerful, and I use those for a lot of things. Most anything I build now, and you can get controllers to actually be able to not only slow down your motor, but also control program the speed. I have a floating candle that goes around the mausoleum and through the yard, and 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 the idea for the floating candle came from talking to my son. We were talking about the axe-worthy ghosts that fly up overhead,
Yeah.
and I was thinking, kind of cool to have something on a smaller scale down lower in the yard. And we were talking about, man, could we fly a bat or something around, and came up with the idea for the candle. But I think what really sells it is not that it's just going around and around in a circle constantly, is that it goes slowly, and then very slowly, and sometimes it stops, and then it'll go again, and sometimes it stops and then after a minute it goes the other way. It just looks like it's an actual spirit, kind of going through the
Right.
yard. Those controllers and motors, I get a lot of that from online. Either there's a place called monsterguts.com and frightprops.com. Fright Props makes all sorts of cool timers and controllers to maybe trigger a prop, or control your motors. And they have a lot of mechanisms, and they sell even anything from from fake limbs and masks and all that stuff too. I mean, anybody. They really sell to professional haunted houses for anything they need.
Yeah.
But they have some great stuff. But I always spend way too much if I'm getting supplies, and so I try to consolidate my purchases and shipping, and get it in time for Halloween, right?
Right.
But,
Here,
for the most part, it's the home
the,
store, honestly.
they look weathered so well. I mean, do you have a technique for this? I mean, how do you get that weathered cement look? It just looks so good.
Yeah, probably just a lot of experimenting, but it's just the secret is a lot of layers of paint. I mean, you paint them initially with a gray. They're like a light gray, and they just look so stark and boring, right? So, they might be a little over weathered, but for Halloween, I think it looks great.
Perfect.
Um,
Yeah.
so I start with a base coat, and then usually get different colors. I think in the case of the columns you're seeing there, that there's some green and black, and that paint, I'll pour a little in a pan and add some water and just water it down so it's pretty thin, and then use a rag or a sponge to just dab a little on, and kind of brush it around that sign, and you see where it's kind of running down. I think I use the brush with the watered paint to actually just kind of make those streaks, but then go back after you just put it on and it's wet with a rag, and blot some off. And if it's too heavy, you can use a wet rag and wipe it off. But just build up layers, and then stand back and look at it from afar. And because sometimes you work in one layer and that's what your eyes focus on. But
Yeah.
done with the green, and go back and add a little gray or brown, or um, I find I spend probably too much time fretting over the painting and doing that kind of detail, when and I find it's in the daytime I'm happy with it, and then at night I see it in the yard and think, well, you can't even see most of what I put on there, 90% of that, but that detail. But in my mind, I guess I feel better that I I made it look the way I wanted it to.
Right.
But just lots of layers, and and it's good to experiment on some things, right?
Yeah.
First, before you go and do it on your actual prop. But um, yeah, and there's tombstones. I've done different things from painting those same methods. Usually with the tombstones, carve the letters out, and it's got a base coat on it of just latex paint, and then I'll get some watered down black and put inside the letters to kind of help them pop and look like dirt in the letters.
Hmm.
I've done some with spray paint and a misted water bottle, and that works great. And um, splattering paint. There's different spray paints you can buy. But there's, I don't know, all sorts of experimenting you can do with
Yeah.
it. And each batch of tombstones I make is usually a few years apart. I find I have to kind of remember what I was doing, but I also maybe learn something new that I like. Oh, this
Right.
is
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit, if that's okay. I want to ask you a different type of question. Now, I've been to your display before, and in Utah, we get crazy weather. It could be hot or it could be snowing around Halloween. You never really know. And I've been to your place, I think it was at your old home, where it had snowed and you had your display out. My question for you is um, do you have a favorite good or bad memory about putting up or taking down during strange weather? Do you have a year that really stands out for you where you go, oh, I remember that year?
Yeah, certainly I do. I know the years you're talking about where we had snow on the ground and it covered the tombstones, and that was either 2003 or 2004. Both those years it snowed at some point. 2003 was probably the bigger snow year. I mean, it just I was dealing with ice and trying to make my little ghosts, the Axworthy ghosts flying overhead. They were brand new that year in 2003, and I think they only got them to run the one night, the last night, because they were new and the cold, freezing temperatures were causing me grief. But the cemetery looked so cool with the snow on it, and obviously, though, I think those years I had it set up before the snow. I was lucky to not have to deal with the snow, and then it snowed and covered everything, so you didn't see like all my footprints everywhere. Right, it looked nice and pristine. Those years stand out, and then we really didn't have snow. On the ground or on the display ever since. So it's been, 20 years. I've gotten some years where it snowed during the setup a little bit, not enough to really stick, but just enough to, make it miserable out there setting it up. Um, the one year I remember, I think it was 2019, we had this record cold air from uh, Canada come through, and it was just freezing like this. Like the high for the day was probably 30 degrees or below freezing, and I remember
Yeah.
in the nights it was in the teens. It was like 19, 20 degrees or just frigid, and I was fighting some motors and those ghosts again, just not liking to run in that kind of cold temperature.
Yeah.
um, that's probably stands out the most. The wind is the thing I fear the most, as I mentioned earlier. That if it gets too windy, the ghosts overhead I've got to bring down. They'll get tangled up on the line, or um, and I've had a couple tombstones, snap in the wind. There's a
Mm.
couple certain ones. I know the ones that I got, and so now I try to position them or put them by something to help shield them a little bit. And there's others that work great, but for the most part, yeah. And again, only running 3 nights helps. I've had pretty good
Yeah.
luck with the weather. Um,
Yeah, I often wondered if the 3 nights had something to do with that or tampering with your display or just any of those things. So it's interesting that you started off and you just found that that was the right balance early on. Sometimes people get to something like that because they're forced to for some reason. So that's interesting to hear how you determined that. Um, what is your most finicky or I don't know what's been the one or two props that you go, oh, this thing's driving me nuts? Is it the ghosts that fly around?
it was for several years. Yes, I mean, um, once they're set up and running, they work pretty well. I used to have a single motor. Really, what I've got is two for those overhead ghosts. I've got two separate tracks, two triangles that are back to back, so they share. And I've used poles because I didn't have trees. When I saw the Axworthy ghosts down that fly overhead, they were done with anchor points to either trees or to the house. Initially, I did put a couple of them on the side of my house, but I didn't. I don't know. It didn't look good. And then, I had to improvise where I didn't have the house, I didn't have trees, into using some conduit poles. It's inch and a half electrical conduit, and I cemented a piece in the ground a couple feet down with a threaded end, a cap, and I just bring out the pole that goes on top of that and couple it on with the threads, and then fly my ghost from that. And that pole worked great because the poles kind of just flex just enough when you get the line tension just right. They provide their own tension, and they're reliable, and I can take them up and down and put them away. Um, so that was great. The
Yeah.
problem with I had the two tracks. I had one motor with a drive line, was basically screen door rubber wire, like a spline that you'd use for screen. I'd tie it and use that to turn the two bicycle wheels from the one motor, and that worked and it ran great. But that eventually that rubber screen spline would get brittle and crack and break, especially when it's cold. So it would probably run for maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours, and either would stretch out and have to retie it a little tighter to be effective, or then eventually it would break. And so I was going up and down the ladder every, several times over those 3 days. It's not like it was breaking every 30 minutes, right? It might run for, I might have to go up every couple hours and either retighten it or just maybe maybe one day out of the 3 or 2 to fix it. But um, that was kind of a pain point. And over the years, I've tweaked that and tried different things. And finally, now what I use, and that was, I think I only changed it up in 2021, so 3 years, 4 years ago, is just got rid of the single motor and the drive line and just used two windshield wiper motors that I mentioned earlier independently up there, and they each turn their own bicycle wheel. So there's no more drive line, and they just run, they run all night with no problems or hiccups. So that's
great.
That's been great. I think for the most part, yeah, everything's pretty trouble free, but occasionally something acts up. Number one of problem effect is definitely that axe worthy, and just because you got to get up on the ladder, and it's there's a lot that can go wrong with that. But
Yeah.
after this long, after 20 plus years of doing it, I've gotten it running pretty well. Knock on wood.
Yeah, you've worked out the kinks.
Yeah. Other than that, it's just crazy because there'll be things that work reliably and have worked reliably for 10 years. And then some, just last year, I had a weird little new issue come up with the candle that floats around that I was like, and I thought it must have just been tangled or something. And I got it all fixed and worked out. And then the next night it did it again. And I'm like, I've run this for like 10 or 11 years and not ever had this problem. Why am I having it now? And I'm not sure I figured that one out yet, but
Yeah.
there's a lot to keep me on my toes.
Well, I do want to ask you about that. I don't know if you want to share how it works. If you don't, that's
Oh
fine.
no, that's fine.
The floating candle out in the, I have literally tried to look for how that's happening. I mean, I'm like looking and staring and trying to figure. It just looks like it's floating by itself. And is it on string that's being moved around? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just like the X-worthy ghosts that fly on there up above the yard. It's the same exact fishing line I use for both. So there's bicycle wheels that are for the candle. They're about 6 feet in the air
Yeah.
on smaller conduit. I think it's 3/4 inch conduit and just some small. Those I like those. If you can get those bicycle rims or trailer rims that are the plastic mag wheels, they don't have the spokes. So I used to have the spokes, and the spokes have the spoke, uh, the end of the nipple on the inside of the spoke that would catch the line and pluck it or wear it out. But those mag wheels are smooth, and they're just the tracks for that line. But the line I use, and it's not a secret because I use it for years, and it's been on my website under the Axworthy project page. It's spider wire, and it's like a dark moss green color. But I use like a 50-pound. It's a braided Teflon line, so it's really strong and it doesn't really stretch. And put a lot of tension on it, but the color and how thin it is, it just disappears. Even in the daytime, when you're walking by my yard in the daytime, where I'm not running the display because I don't really run in the daytime because I have so many things that are meant for the lighting and the effects. They only work at night, so. But you can look up at those poles, and it's really hard to sometimes see that line. You can see it, if you get the light or the sun right, but it's even in the daytime it hides, and it's a great product. I've used it since 2003 when I started using the Axworthy, and I think I stumbled on that one on my own. I don't mean to not give credit to someone else if I got the idea, I can't remember, but and then noticed the later on Fright Props, who I mentioned earlier, who sells everything. They have an Axworthy Ghost kit, and they actually include spider wire in that same product in their kit. And I have to wonder if they maybe saw that I was using that,
Right.
but they come up with it on their own. It hides well. It's great. It's the brand Spider Wire. You can just Google it and find it. I know it got sold to another company or somebody else owns them now, but you can find it at any, Walmart even, or online or Sportsman's Warehouse. It's just a dark colored fishing line, but it hides so well. And even with something behind it, like the mausoleum it's going in front of, it's hard to see it, especially at night.
Yeah.
But it's just,
I've
just
tried.
that.
I have tried to see it, and more than 1 year. And each time I'm like, I don't see how that's working. It's driving me nuts.
That's great. That's great because even one of the points I have, the candle goes around 3 bicycle wheel points, right? It goes around the mausoleum. There's kind of 2 in the back, and there's one up in the front. And the one in the front is right by the sidewalk and the fence, and where people are standing to view Eleanor. It's right there. I mean,
Yeah.
you can reach out and almost touch it. So, and the fact that it hides even that close and people don't see it is uh, it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
It works well.
Well, on the screen right now, we have the Atmos FX thing that we were talking about earlier. I love that. You're right. It reminds me of Disney, the Haunted Mansion. Um, it really is a great effect. And I know that when that company came out with this whole process a bunch of years back, it was, I think, groundbreaking, really. So it's
Sure,
pretty
I
cool.
agree. I agree, and that's like say I kind of have fun as a hobby building everything I do, and and claiming it's homemade, but that their products and the video and the projections were just so groundbreaking and cool that that's something took exception to just add it, even though I didn't produce it, right. I love it, and that goes there. That's an older product of theirs, but I've got a mix of things now, and they have new ones that fit my theme. They've got several that don't fit my theme, but I use the ones that I think work and kind of randomize them in there. And they walk by the window or float up to the top of the window. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I tried initially, just real quick on this particular. That's an upstairs window over our driveway, and initially, I mean, I had the lights off, and the the video of the ghost pops well with the dark behind, right? But I think having some light in the room, I put just a little dimmer on a bulb in there just to provide some light. It's probably a little brighter there based on maybe the photo, but just a little bit of light so you can like see through the ghost until it's transparent into the room, and that really helps sell it.
Yes, I
It
agree.
looks it looks really really good.
It does.
But
It really does.
yeah, love those products of theirs, and they've been a great addition. And they're easy and reliable as long as any home hunter has a safe place to put their projector or
Yeah.
TV or whatever they want to use. But you can do them, like in this case, inside and project from the inside. So if you don't want to have anything outside at all that could get stolen or rained on or snowed and ruined, you just run it all from the inside out your window, and it works well.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question now for people that are interested in doing some level of a home haunt or doing a display. What would you consider one of the biggest misconceptions about how to do one of these? Like, like sometimes people think it's pretty easy. Oh, I'll just do this and that. They don't put a lot of thought into it. And then they get into it and they go, oh man, it's a little bit different than what I thought. Is there anything like that um, you can think of that maybe people might want to consider when they get into it a little bit?
Yeah, I like you said, I think you definitely can find out it's like opening a can of worms, right? You want to do something, and then you find yourself knee deep in all sorts of problems or issues or things you didn't think about. So start small and work your way up, like I did. But um, I get people that ask me about the Axeworthy ghost, or I talk to them, right? And or they're talking about them in my yard and asking me questions about everything, and they're like, "Well, I want to add those Axeworthy ghosts to fly overhead next year." And I say, "Well, start early on that one particularly, and do a lot of testing, and and the weather's good, and that one also. I try to just tell people, be careful because you're up on a ladder and it's high, and I just worry about. There's a lot of room for things to go wrong, I guess, in that one. So I would say before try to tackle that project first, start with ones that are on the ground, like tombstones or
Yeah.
whatever you want to do. There's a ton of great animated stuff that is out there. Um, there's a local group. I'm not officially a member, but they're called the Rocky Mountain Haunters, and they kind of cover the Utah and the whole Rocky Mountain area. They get together in the summer. I think I don't know how often, but maybe a few times a year, and they sign up and build. They kind of choose a project and build it together, right? Have a workshop where they all get together and build. Maybe it's a grave popper or a
Wow.
witch stirring a cauldron, whatever it is. Um, and they'll have all the supplies, and you pay the money, and they all kind of work on them together. And that's a real camaraderie way to build and learn new things. If you're really not sure how to start, I'd
Yeah.
probably recommend that. Even though I've never done that myself, I just kind of want to do my own thing and on my own time. But definitely they've been great. Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, just be careful. The foam with the tombstones, I've carved a lot of those and use power tools to cut them or route them, and it creates a ton of dust, that foam, and you don't want to breathe that in. So wear an N95 mask. Just try to be sensible about what you're doing, the materials
Yeah.
you're working with. But start small. Don't bite off more than you can chew at first, and then just grow into it as you can. Um, and build with the end in mind, right? Think about, how am I going to store this? Like you asked earlier, I had to think that or ask myself that question when I wanted to build that mausoleum to house the flying crank ghost Eleanor. I'm like, I've got to be able to store it, and so I had to build it with breaking it down in mind and coming apart and putting it together each year. Um, there's a lot of thought that goes into this, and there can be, or not if you just buy a prop at Home Depot or the Halloween stores and put it out, and that's what you want to do, and that's great too. But it takes a lot of the trial and error out of it, right? If you buy something that's already made, but I love making something that's a little different than what you can buy.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
that's really what inspires me to keep going. And speaking of something you can't buy, that one prop in the back of that photo there, we had the gray slab in the foreground, and that was before it got repainted a lighter color, but or maybe it is, I can't tell, sorry, but the weeping widow in the back, as we call her, it's the
I
cloaked
love
woman
that
kneeling
one.
at the bench. That one, yeah, I think we came up with that one. I hadn't seen that one before, so that was my wife's idea, and to build, because I was wanting to build something that moved, but like a figure of some kind, and work it into the yard, and it was her idea to have a widow with crying sounds, and actually her head moves up and down like she's crying in the yard. That was going to give credit to her for that idea, and then put that one together. And a lot of people do like that one. They always think she's real or going to stand up and chase after her. Like if they're not, at least little kids are always asking me, "Is she real?" And I don't want to just say no. I always try to
Right.
play along. Well, maybe she's just really sad. But
It's
that
a
was a
great
fun
one.
one.
I do love it. I mean, like the grandkids saw that last year as well, and they were asking if it was real. Is she going to get up? And yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
And what's neat too with that one, I mean, since it was, to have people ask me questions about. Sometimes I get emails in the summer, usually around July or August. People are building stuff and doing stuff, and I'll get people emailing me or, um, well, what did you use here, or tell me how I can do that, or and I'll answer those questions, and then later maybe after they've built it, they'll send me a video, and I've had a couple people send me that one particularly of their version of that and their take on it. And it's a little different, but it's the same, and it's kind of neat to see there somebody else's take on something unique that we started, and they wanted im- imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? So
Right. Right.
it's kind of cool to see someone want to build something that and copy what you did just because they love it that much. And um, so yeah, I had a lot of fun. It's rewarding to see people build their own versions, and I'd love to offer help where I can, but I'd love to see them just kind of do their own, run with it, and do their own spin on it too.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a couple questions here back to back. What is the crown jewel of your display? What would you consider it today? Because I know probably in the past, I think I know what the answer would be. It may still be the same answer.
Yeah, that's a tough question, really. It's I'd have to say Eleanor, that flying crank ghost, because it was since the first year we had it, we built it. and still is today, I would say, because everything's kind of centered around that and built from that. But I don't think any one other thing steals the show from that one effect, but it's really the summation of everything, right? That kind of sells the whole
Yep.
display, working together. I mean, individual pieces are all great. The lighting even is awesome when it goes off, and I had that lighting go off every 5 minutes, and I didn't want it constantly going off so that people are like tired of it. But it's great to have it every 5 minutes because somebody that's never been out will usually pull up in their car and they might spend 10 minutes at our house, some longer, some shorter, but it's just often enough that they get out of their car and we wander around looking at things, and it surprises them when that flash goes off and the volume of it. I tried to make it sound and look real. Um, that's just a little thing, right? But it adds to the whole thing. The projection, I mean, just the fog, it all works together. But I have to
Yep.
say the Flying Crane Ghost, which is kind of the centerpiece and started it all.
And what would you consider your favorite prop or display or section of the display? Do you have a favorite, or has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, Eleanor, the Flying Crane Ghost was the favorite, obviously, and for good reason. And then as things have been added, there's um, little things I like that the PB Herman monument I added last year might be my favorite right now, just because it's the newest thing, but it's also very unique, right? I don't have any other tombstones that open up and quotes from the movie Big Adventure at you and close. It's been fun. I think one of the things I've considered a favorite of mine is that floating candle. I call it the Restless Candle, but it's such a small thing, right? The candle's only that tall, and it's just a battery LED flicker candle, and it's on a piece of fishing line that goes around those pulleys, and driven by one of those wiper motors we talked about, and a picovolt controller. The picovolt controller is the controller that you can program the speed of the motor, and that's what makes it stop and reverse direction. But it's such a subtle effect, right? It
Yeah.
goes around the mausoleum, around the yard, and it moves very slowly. And so some of the time it's behind the mausoleum, and you don't even see it. I get a kick out of that because we've had it since 2011, and here we are 13 years later, and I'm sure last year I had people that are asking me, is that new? And they've come for 10 years, right? But either it's so subtle they're missing it, or it's just maybe they're not noticing it. It's very small, but I love that. That's my favorite of mine because it's so subtle people miss it, but it's just such a neat detail.
That
Not
was going to
flashy
be
or
one of my
but
questions, was what you thought was something somebody might miss if they're not careful. Would it be that then?
definitely that's one thing for sure. Yes, yes, the Restless Candle. I think a lot of people miss that one. Second to that, I might say just some of the tombstones. A lot of them, as I said, are just random names because I initially I didn't want jokes on them or things like this, you know, um, which is funny because even the Haunted Mansion has tombstones in their outside of the ride that are all jokes and
Yeah.
all. But initially, I wanted just kind of like a realistic cemetery. But now I'm starting to do things like that are nods. And this one here is the back of um, a tombstone. That is the one that's a tribute to Disney. It just has its initials on it, WED, for Walter Elias Disney, and it's got the Club 33 logo on the front. But the inscription on it is on a plaque as you enter Disneyland and walk under the bridge for the train. And I'm not gonna get it right, but it's something like, "Here you leave today and enter the world of yesterday and tomorrow in fantasy," something like that. I'm butchering it, I think, but um, it was meant as coming out of the real world into the magic of Disneyland, and I just thought, oh, that's fitting for a tribute tombstone to Walt Disney because he I created all this based on just being enamored with Disneyland as a kid, right? If he didn't create that, I may not be doing what I do today. So, but there's a lot of those little details on the tombstones that it's dark and they're hard to see sometimes and read from a distance behind the gate, but there's a lot of little things like that are just little nods to people or things that get missed sometimes, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun if
Yeah,
they get missed for a while.
I was going to say people, stare, look, take a few minutes because there's a lot of neat stuff that is worth taking a few minutes to look at it for sure.
There's a lot of detail, even if visitors stay and spend time. Like I say, they're not going to see everything, and that's really the goal, right? Is that I want when you come back each year to see maybe something you hadn't seen before, because there's just so much to be seen, right? You can't take it all in one visit usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does the yard, in your opinion, tell a story in the sense that you should start from the right and work to the left? Or I just wondered, if you looked at the yard that way and said, hey, I'm going to tell you something as you walk from one end, because everybody does, right? They either start at one end or the other, but they just systematically walk and enjoy it and all the way around to the corner and then around the corner. So,
yeah. We're on a corner lot, so it gives us a nice big area. You can start at one end and not see what's around the corner unless you walk over there. And it's kind of filled out over the years around the corner. No, there's not a. And I've talked about story and theme, but more just a theme. It's a cemetery theme. There's not an actual story in an order you have to view in any certain order. I think that'd be really cool, but I'd have to have it narrated or figure out a way to tell that story. But I've settled with just it being viewable at its own pace, and anywhere you want to start, it's fine. It's just a spooky, fun cemetery with the ghosts and skeletons coming alive for Halloween, and that just captures just magic, as a kid
yeah.
being going, oh, this is so cool, and even adults come and act like kids, and they say this is so fun and cool. I just love seeing that because they just reminds them of maybe when they were kids at Halloween. And there's the Disney tombstone, again, a little better lighting.
Yeah.
Those are still the floodlights, which is fine, but yeah, they're they're well lit and brightly lit that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can view it in any order. That would be cool though to have a more underlying story, but I haven't been able to come up with what that is just yet.
Well, you know what? I mean, I think that's part of it though. Like I think when somebody's walking around, like some years I've done that where I go, okay, like let me see if I can tell myself a story as I walk through the yard here. So I mean, that's part of it too. It's like that person can have their own story based on going one direction or the other. So I like it. But here's a picture on the screen of just how amazing those tombstones look. Anyway, sir, I think I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, it's kind of like some of those songs, there's so many great songs and some of them are a little obscure on what the lyrics mean, and everybody's interpreted what they mean. You can find 1,000 different interpretations, but everybody wants to know, what did the composer or the artist mean, and they ask them, and sometimes they answer that question and sometimes they don't answer that question for the purpose of, it's better to let the viewer, the listener, come up with what they want it to mean, and that sells the story. And I think that's how the Haunted Mansion is. I rode that as a kid going, this is just a cool ride, but then you start thinking, and there's the Hatbox Ghost and the bride, and there's a whole story there. It could be, but really it's just kind of left kind of vague, just to be speak for itself and let your imagination run. But yeah, sorry, back to what you were saying. The tombstones, they're all painted a little differently and they're all a little unique. Some look older, some look others, and they're forgiving, because if you have a mistake in your tombstone or accidentally break a piece of the corner off when you're trying to shape or detail it, it's meant to look old and kind of run down, but they're all homemade. I mean, obviously the little fence around the one there is just a garden fence, and the angel on the one in the back, the angel is just a yard ornament out of resin, I put on the tombstone. So I didn't carve that angel. There's people that do carve and have those skills, but that's not me. I'm a little more.
Hey, you're doing enough.
On the basics, but yeah, it turned out well.
So the one question I have for you is, I don't know if there's any prop or portion of the display that maybe we didn't talk about or that was not included in the pictures. Is there anything you wanted to share? Maybe there's just something that I didn't include that is worth it, so people can take a look when they come by.
Well, there probably is, but I mean, as we've talked about, there's so much that I'm probably forgetting something very obvious. Um, you got the pumpkins in there. That's the Atmos FX pumpkins, and I think if someone is interested or wants to see more, they definitely got to look up one of the YouTube videos. I have several. They can go to ravenmanor.com, and then that's my website. And of course, there's like a photos and video page, or um, there's pictures, but there's also links to the YouTube videos I put out. Some of them are shorter, some are longer. There's just kind of the various different things we were doing. But go and look at one of those, and I try to put a little bit of each. The motion and the things you're not seeing here in the photos, they only tell part of the story because they don't move. But
Yeah.
no, I appreciate you showing the photos and asking the question. I think we've touched on most of the props in the yard. Not, we haven't seen the pop up or rocking skeleton, but they're just kind of subtle. There's fog. There's I run music, like a whole soundtrack through it instead of it, you know, just music. A lot of Danny Elfman. I wanted to mention him because the composing and the music from him kind of really set the mood. And I find that, I don't know, just something about it. When I hear a song that's right for the display, I'll use it in my playlist, and it's always changing and evolving. What else? I mean, we have the basic stuff like fog, and that's hit or miss though, right? Because you get a little bit of wind, and the fog can look great, or it can be just washed away instantly. So,
Well, I think the big thing is people, after sitting through this and watching this episode, go take a look. What did we miss? There's a lot there. And, like, it's like we were saying earlier, you can go every year for a period of time and see something and not really recognize, oh man, I don't remember that quite like that. So it's fun. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, thank you. There's certainly a lot that we haven't seen. We've talked about some of it, like the floating candelabra and the Pepper's Ghost in the office, and the Axworthy Ghost we've talked a bit about, right? But I don't think they don't really represent well in a photo.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of high up in the air and they blur. Usually they're moving, right? You try to take a photo, they kind of blur into the back, blur, and you can't see them so well. With the video, will show you that. But yeah, if you have the time, check it out, or the interest. It's a labor of love, and certainly that's why I do it and build it. Is just people can enjoy it. So
yeah,
check it out. If you have any questions, people can contact me through my site or direct message through one of the channels.
And Dave, after we get done here, we'll talk about it. But I want to get some of those links for you. I'll include it with the episode so people can have that as right there reference that they can use as well. Yeah, definitely take advantage. See the website. It's a great website, and those videos, it's wonderful. And then most importantly, if you're in the South Jordan area, go check it out. You have 3 nights to do it right around Halloween. Don't miss it. I was going to ask you what advice you have for people wanting to do this. We've kind of talked through that. So my next question would have been, how do people reach you again? It sounds like if people bounce a question off you, that you're there and you're able to and willing to give them some advice.
Yeah, I am. I try to.
Yeah.
I have through the years. Get asked some of the same questions, repeatedly over the years too. So, tried to provide helpful info. And on my website, it's been out there. It's old. It was there just meant to help share the information for people. I've even put my original drawings and building plans for my gate columns and fence and my mausoleum out there. Just trying to share it and have a community. People were really great when I started out, when I asked questions to help me out. And I really just want to return that favor, and do the same. So yeah, I've got my website, and there's an email link on there, or the Facebook page. It'll be linked, Raven Manor UT for Utah, but contact me there too. And I'll do my best to answer questions and help where I can. It might get a little busy if it's right near, setup time and get a bunch of questions at once, but certainly will do my best to answer them as I can.
That's great. Look, I really enjoyed our discussion here today, and to not only talk about that great display, but kind of whet my appetite for when it's time again to swing by. And then I'll make sure I shake your hand in person when I'm out there. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed this. And people, you will not be disappointed if you check out Raven Manor. It's the place to go right around Halloween. So, as we wrap up today, I want to thank you once again, Dave, and I want to say to the audience, remember that there is a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality. Always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. And until next time, stay safe.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.